everyone. Thanks for tuning in online, wherever you're tuning in from. My name is Ben. If I haven't had the chance to meet you yet, I'm new here on staff at Connexus Church. I'm one of the pastors, and I'm just so glad and excited to be with you this morning. Just to get to know me a little bit, I'm originally from BC, and me and my family moved out here about 2 years ago to Ontario to do ministry here in the Ontario, GTA, Toronto area. I'm married to my wife, Nicole. I have 4 kids, Shavi, Mason, Vesper, and Lennon, and we just love being part of the Connexus Church family. This season for us, this year for us, like a lot of you, has been a season of waiting. We actually heard about this job early on at the very start of the pandemic. And so I felt like most of this year was just waiting to get an interview, waiting to go through the process, waiting to get this job. And so for me, this moment is a culmination of all this waiting that I've been doing this whole year. So I'm really excited to share this message with you. But 2020 in a nutshell could be described as a season of waiting. I know a lot of you out there are probably still in this moment of waiting maybe to see your loved ones, waiting for this pandemic to be over, waiting for you to get a job again, waiting for things to open up, waiting to be able to travel again. Waiting is a great way to describe this season. And what I want to talk to you about is how to wait well. How to wait well. Because in this moment of waiting, there's a way to wait well and there's a way to wait not so well. And this is my hope and this is my heart for you as we begin this talk. If there's anything that I've learned about waiting well is that there's something that can happen to you if you don't wait well. Something that could shift your mindset and your outlook in your life, no matter who you are. If you consider yourself a follower of Jesus or not, maybe you're a skeptic. Maybe you have just turned on to this YouTube channel and you don't even know how you got here. Whoever you are and wherever you're at, if you allow this time to form you and shape you, it could turn out really badly for you. And we're going to get to that in a second. But this is what I believe matters, why this all matters. I want you to come out of this year, out of this season of waiting better than how you came into it. My hope is, as we look at what it looks like to wait well, as we talk about it, hopefully, as we near the end of this year, you'll get a renewed sense of vision for the future. Because what we believe about our future completely controls how we experience the present. I'm going to say that again. What we believe about the future completely controls how we experience the present. I love an illustration and a story a retired pastor at NYC talks about, which is a great example of this. He said this: imagine you have 2 women. They're the same age and have the same socioeconomic status. They have the same educational level and even the same temperament. You hire both of them and say to each of them, you're part of this assembly line, okay? You're going to put part A into part B, and then you're going to pass it on. I want you to do this, you tell them, for 8 hours a day. You put them in identical rooms with identical lighting, identical temperature, identical ventilation, and you know it's 2020, so you give them masks and some sanitizing bottles of some sort, right? But you go about this boring work, and their conditions are exactly the same, but there's one difference. One woman, you tell her, at the end of this all, you're going to make $30K. The other woman, you tell her, he writes, that you're going to make $30 million. After the first couple of weeks, the first woman will be saying, isn't this tedious? Isn't this driving you insane? Aren't you thinking about quitting? And the other woman who it was promised $30 million will respond something like this: no. This is perfectly acceptable. In fact, I whistle while I work. What's going on here? What's going on in this story? You have 2 human beings who are experiencing identical circumstances in radically different ways. What makes the difference? I'll tell you this, it's not the income that they were promised. It's their expectation about the future. It's their expectation about the future. And this isn't general hopefulness. Scientific studies show that just because you have a sunny disposition or you're an optimistic person doesn't always lead to a combination that leads to a deeper meaning of life, a deeper good life. This hope that I'm going to talk about is a deeper hope. What is it, you might ask? Well, I want to show you what this hope is by looking at a story in a book called Luke. If you have a Bible in front of you, it's like the back half of your Bible, also known as the New Testament, and it's written by a doctor who goes by the name of Luke. And waiting isn't a foreign concept to the people of the Bible. In this story that we're about to read, the people called the Israelites, in this story, the Jewish people, have been waiting for 400 years. That's a long time, isn't it? For some of us, I don't know about you, but these last 9 months have felt like 400 years. I know I'm exaggerating, but it felt like a long time. So imagine 400 years, these people, the Israelites, are waiting for what? Waiting to be released from the oppression of the Roman Empire, waiting for God to show up, waiting for all these promises that we find in this book of the Bible that are made to these people, ones of prospering, ones of hope to come true. But 400 years is a long time. For some of us, it's hard to comprehend. So to give you a bit of an understanding of 400 years, from this point, 2020, if you look 400 years back, here's a couple things that have happened. Galileo proved that planets orbit around the sun. Manhattan was purchased by the Dutch for $24. The Taj Mahal was built. And don't get distracted in this moment. You could Google all of that later and see if I'm right. But what these people, the Israelites, are doing, they have been waiting for 400 years. And we come into the story and we're introduced to two characters. Luke 6 writes this: Zechariah and Elizabeth were righteous in God's eyes, careful to obey all of the Lord's commandments and regulations. They had no children because Elizabeth was unable to conceive, and they were both very old. Pretty much what I want you to get out of this is that they're good people. They're good people. They're obedient to God's law, which are these laws that God has given the Israelite people to follow in order to be in relationship with him. So they are obedient to these laws. They obey every one of them, this verse is telling us. But also, I want you to understand how hopeless their situation is. See, in this culture, to be a couple without kids is to somewhat be looked at as if you were cursed by God. Not having kids is equivalent to being cursed by God in this culture. And that's what they're experiencing. And not only that, their situation becomes more hopeless because, as you can see, as the verse tells us, they're old in age. Some people think they're in their 70s or their 80s. So the possibility of having kids is way out of their view. The thought for Zechariah in this scene, for Elizabeth, of having a kid has long left their mind. But as the story continues, we see this happen in verse 11. Zechariah, a priest serving in church, verse 11 reads this: while Zechariah was in the sanctuary, an angel of the Lord appeared to him, standing to the right of the incense altar. An angel shows up, and Zechariah was shaken and overwhelmed with fear when he saw him. But the angel said this: don't be afraid, Zechariah. God has heard your prayer. Your wife, Elizabeth, will give you a son, and you are to name him John. I want you to stop there for a second because someone needs to hear this. Let this verse speak to you. When it comes to your prayers, when it comes to what you're praying about right now in this moment, don't take an absence of an answer as a no. Just because you're not getting an answer right now in this moment, don't take it as a no. Take heart, first and foremost, that God hears your prayers, whatever they may be. And I want to be careful not to give you false hope in this moment, but a lot of the time, God has something better for you in mind when it comes to those prayers. And sometimes it might be not a no, but not a right now. I know this to be true in my own life because as I was making the shift over to Ontario back in 2018, I came to this moment in my ministry life when I realized that I think that God was calling me to move to Toronto. I was working at a great church called Village Church. Some of you know Mark Clark. He's done a bunch of different series and preaching for us here at Connexus Church. He's a good friend of mine. And I was working for him at Village Church at a great role as the young adult and a site pastor there. And as May 2018 came into play, I started feeling this tug, this sense that God wanted me to pursue this calling that he put in my heart, in my mind a long time ago, years ago, back in 2013. And what I felt was I had to resign my role at Village Church and to pursue this calling. And as I was pursuing it, as I resigned that job at Village Church, I thought that God was clearly leading me as I prayed into it to this church in Malibu, right? Who doesn't want to go and work in Malibu? Malibu, yeah, California, right? And I was like so into this role because I thought it was like the perfect role for me. Going to be a campus pastor at this church down there, lead this campus at Malibu, preach and teach on occasion. And everything to me looked like God was making this happen. So as a seven on the Enneagram, just being full of adventure and fun and just liking to go and do stuff, I went down to California. I booked a trip for me and my wife to go down and have a bit of vacation. I didn't have a job anyways, so there was nothing to lose. And so as we went down there, and as we started our vacation, I started texting with this pastor to find out that not only didn't have time to meet with me to have coffee, but also that they were going a different direction and they no longer were looking to fill this role, this pastoral campus role. My heart in that moment was broken. I was so disappointed. And looking back in that time, I just remember that week so vividly as we were driving the Californian coast. I was just asking God, like, I've been praying, I've been seeking you. I thought that this is what you wanted for me, but I got no answer. There was no answer. Until months later, I found myself getting a job in the GTA area and having my family move 2 months after that moment to Ontario. And looking at it in retrospect, I see the hand of God all over it. I see God's timing all over it. I actually see that that was the best decision for me and my family. God had something better in mind. Why? Not only did I feel that I was being obedient and started to fulfill my calling that I had felt that God put on my life, but also I was looking back in that moment and I remember that I was hearing on the news all these horrible fires in Malibu happening. And I was like, okay, God spared me from that. But then forward to the pandemic, and I can't imagine what my family would be doing stuck in California. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to make light of this situation. My sister's in California, but the States, I feel in a lot of sense, has been going through this a lot worse than we have been here in Canada. And I'm praying for them. But looking at how God did everything and maneuvered everything and moved these events and brought me here, I thank God that my prayers weren't answered because he did have something better in mind. And when it comes to Zechariah and Elizabeth in this passage, God had something better in mind for them too. Why? Because the angel continues in verse 14 and says that the son that they're going to have is not just any son, he's going to be great. He says, you will have a great joy and gladness, and many will rejoice at his birth, talking about the boy, for he will be great in the eyes of the Lord. You can read about John the Baptist and the significance of his ministry later on, but he was a great leader, and he was sent by God to prepare the way for Jesus, what this Christmas season is all about. It's the story of Jesus coming. But I want to key in on Zechariah's response to this announcement, this good news that the angel brings to him. In the very telling of this good news, this is Zechariah's response. This is what he had the audacity to say to this angel, to his face. How can I be sure this will happen? How can I be sure this will happen? Verse 18 reads, I'm an old man now, and my wife is also well along in years. At first glance, to me, that's a logical response for any of us who would be in our 70s or 80s, right? Old people don't have kids. I get it. But don't forget the situation that Zechariah is in right now. He's staring an angel in the face, and he is doubting. And don't get me wrong, I'm not criticizing or taking apart his doubt. Hear me right. I don't see doubt as something wrong. I actually see doubt as a tool God can use to move you closer to him. And right now, if you're a skeptic or if you are tuning in and you're just curious about what this Christianity thing is all about, don't let your doubt paralyze you with guilt. Don't let your doubt paralyze you with guilt. Doubt most often is a sign of someone earnestly seeking to understand faith. But what I see in this scene is something more than doubt. There's nothing wrong with this doubt, but I see something deeper at play here. What is it? It's cynicism. It's the thought that nothing is ever going to change. And it's easy to slip into it right now, right? Right now in this moment, it's normal in our culture. Just go on the news, searching whatever feed, whatever outlet you read. And there's so many people, so many news outlets saying that it's going to get worse before it's going to get better. And I get that. I get that they're trying to be realistic. I get the science behind what they're saying, but this is what blows my mind. None of us have ever been through a pandemic, right? So all of what we're saying, all of what we're doing it's just guesses to what someone would do in a pandemic. None of us have actually been through this and actually know. It's all guesses of what's going to happen on the other side of this. But this is how cynicism comes into play. And here's what I'm trying to say. One writer, pastor in New York by the name of John Tyson writes this in one of his books. Maybe all the bad news is clouding our perspective of what is happening in the world. Maybe we have been trained to pay attention to the darkness and ignore the light. Maybe there's more grace and redemption happening if we just knew where to look. Maybe we have to learn to identify and celebrate the good and learn to resist a culture of cynicism. Why? Because no matter who you are, if you're a follower of Jesus or not, it will lead you down a road towards hopelessness. See, Zechariah's hopelessness in this scene is undergirded by cynicism that has grown over time. And get me, I have experienced this hopelessness. In my early 20s, before I was following Jesus, I just found myself one fall in this horrible situation. The situation where I lost my job, that I was in academic probation, just days away from being kicked out of school, and my girlfriend dumped me. In that moment, I let cynicism take a hold of me, and it was growing throughout that year in my life, going unrecognized until that moment, where I thought to myself, nothing will ever change. And I came to this wrong conclusion that I wanted to end my life, that life wasn't worth living anymore. And I look back in that moment, and what I decided to do was go drinking with my buddies for just a last party celebration with them. But then my decision was that I was going to get in the car, drive home drunk, hoping that I would die. Looking back at that time, it was one of the biggest mistakes of my life. And if you ask me in this moment to this day, how did I get home? I don't know. I don't know, but the grace of God on my life, his hand of protection. I don't know why he would protect me. I didn't deserve to be protected in that moment. I made that choice, but for some reason he did. And if that's where you are, look at me. If that's where you are in this hopeless situation, questioning if life is worth living anymore, can I say this to you? There is hope. God sees you. He loves you. He understands your grief. He understands what you're going through. And in some sense, it's God and his gracious response to Zechariah that we see here in this moment. But I want to speak to you if you find yourself in a place of hopelessness and cynicism has gotten a hold of your mindset. There is hope. God sees you. God loves you. He knows your pain. He knows the grief that you're experiencing right now in this moment. Why do I know that? Because even in this story, in this Christmas story, in this moment of waiting, in this moment of longing, where they're hoping that God would come and save them, he enters in. This is God's answer to us as a world waiting and longing for things to get better. And watch the angel and his response to Zechariah. There's grace written all over his response. In verse 20, he says this, "But now, since you didn't believe what I said, you will be silent and unable to speak until the child is born. For my words will certainly be fulfilled at the proper time." You know, some say, and they look at this and they think that Zechariah is being punished, but I don't see it like that. I see this actually as a gracious response from God being a father, a loving father, saying, hey, you know what? Just be quiet and watch me work. The angel says that these things are still going to come to fulfillment, meaning that his wife is still going to be pregnant, even though he doubted. Isn't that grace? Isn't that getting what you don't deserve? Like if I was the angel or God in this moment, I'd be like, okay, well, you doubted me. That's great. It's not going to happen anymore. But that's not what we see happen here. God, in a gracious moment, shows this man grace. And later on, in the words of Jesus, this is what God is pretty much saying. What is impossible with man is possible with God. And I want you to notice here, God is going to work. He's going to move. He's going to take away the disgrace of this couple and restore them in this society. Not because of their response, but because of his love. It's God's initiative. And this is the problem with cynicism. If we allow in our waiting cynicism to grow and take a hold of ourselves as followers of Jesus, this is what will happen. We will become cynical of God moving, because of all the unanswered prayers. Isn't this what's happening to Zechariah right now in this moment? His response in a nutshell? As followers of Jesus, we won't believe in the possibility that things can change for the better because we know how hard life is. There's a deeper root of this widespread cynicism. We can say we're cynical because life is hard or because the odds are against us, but the real reason for our cynicism is further below the surface, and it comes out of how we answer this question. What do you think God is like? What do you think God is like? If we get this answer wrong, we sow seeds of cynicism in our lives. When we view God as angry or out to get us, it will lead us to a cynical view of life. When we believe that God is passive, again, cynicism. Contrast Zechariah's response with his wife's response in verse 25. Zechariah goes home a week later, tells his wife, and soon after that, the text says that she becomes pregnant. And this is her response. "How kind the Lord is," she exclaimed. "He has taken away my disgrace of having no children. How kind the Lord is." There's no doubt in her response, cynicism hasn't taken a hold of this older woman. Listen to Elizabeth's answer to the question, what God is like. Kind. That's her response. That's her gut response, her initial reaction, kind. And I know I'm adding words here, but it isn't a big stretch to think that this faithful Jewish woman would believe that he's powerful, slow to anger, abounding in love, gracious. Hope is well alive in this woman's answer. And this is the thing that you need to understand about biblical hope in the Bible. Hope is not based on your circumstances, it's based on a person. Hope is not based on your circumstances, it's based on a person. That is what differentiates hope from optimism. Optimism is choosing to see in any situation how circumstances could turn out for the best. But biblical hope is based on a person, that even though there might be no evidence in your circumstances that things will get better, we look at the person, we look at Jesus, we look at God, and we choose hope. Hope because it's based in and on God and who he is. A God that's not aloof up there, removed from our pain and our grief. No, he has entered in. That is the message of Christmas. The story of Christmas is God coming down into our world, becoming human, coming as a child, growing up, entering in our pain, experiencing suffering alongside us, experiencing our grief because he loves us. But not only that, at the end of Jesus' life, he goes to the cross, defeating the power of sin and death and rising from the dead. Not only removing our sin, if we trust him, but also making a path, making a way for us to go back into relationship with God. And this in and of itself, it's showing us the paradigm that God can use bad things and turn them into good things for us, for those who love him. Biblical hope is personal and found in a relationship with God, and it's available for you if you trust him. Right now in this moment, if you trust him. Listen, their childlessness, them not having children, was not due to any personal sin on their part, but it was a result of living in a fallen, sinful world. But God took this bad thing and used it and turned it into a good thing in his sovereign and wise plan for them. This impossible pregnancy is just a foretaste that God's salvation of the world will come in a seemingly impossible way. So as we wait, we have a choice. In this moment, in this season, during this pandemic, we have a choice. We can wait well and choose hope. Hope in a person, God. And because of who he is, this hope is based on a certainty. Because he never changes. It's the only certainty that we have in this uncertain season. Or we can wait poorly. We can allow the bad news to cloud our perspective, and we can allow cynicism to take a hold of us. And if you're there is grace. There is a way out. Take it and give it to God. Allow his Spirit to come in and work in your heart. Allow him to show you where you become cynical. It's actually funny that I mentioned this, but 2 years ago, I actually read our founding pastor's book, Didn't See It Coming, and he has some great practical ways in 2 chapters of how to deal with cynicism in your life, and you can take a look at that. But here's my hope for you as we end. This is my prayer for you in the words of Paul in Romans 15:13. This is my prayer for you. May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. Amen.